So
In this
we'll read
case,
the
okay.
public hearing notice, and then we'll start the hearing. So this is a continuation from last week's council meeting. So in accordance with Master General Law, Chapter 48, Section 11, notice hereby given, Bolton zoning Board of Appeals will hold a continuation of a public hearing on Tuesday, February 19th, 7:30 in the Outdoor Building at 677 Main Street, Bolton, to hear and act upon the applicant of Still River Road Development LLC and Duchesne's and Farrell PC. The applicant is seeking a comprehensive permit for a proposed housing development to be located in Bolton's residential zoning district on Still River Road, identified on Assessors Map 8D as parcel 32, which is approximately 6.68 acres. The applicant is seeking a comprehensive permit to construct 8 units of homeownership housing pursuant to Master General Law, Chapter 40B. The development will consist of 4 2-unit duplex-style buildings located in 2 lots each containing 2 duplex buildings. In conformance with Master General Law 40B, the development will contain 2 affordable units. So we have a fairly detailed agenda for tonight, but we'll follow the same pattern. We'll have an update from the applicant, and then we'll go over comments that we've received in from boards and residents, and we'll schedule another hearing where we can probably work toward some type of conclusion. We're getting close to our deadline of March 22nd, so we'll have to, at some point, work on a draft decision, and so that we can then, if we close the hearing, we then can bring on that decision and come to a conclusion. So, with that.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. As the chairman said, we'll pretty much follow the agenda, and with that, I'd like to give you a quick project update if I could. In doing so, let's start with the engineering. As you all know, Mr. Donahoe has been going back and forth with the peer reviewers, updating plans, answering questions. They've been reviewing, Horsley Witten's been reviewing things, and so it's been quite a back and forth process, although I think I'm happy to, I know I'm happy to say, and I think I'm correct. It appears that we've gotten what we hope is our final letter from Horsley Witten, whereby they have addressed each of the answers and responses that we have provided to them. I know the conclusion of the letter is that we have satisfied all of their concerns. However, within the letter, there are, I believe, 3 or 4 instances where Horsley Witten has suggested a condition to the board. We've reviewed all of those, and we are comfortable with those particular issues being addressed as conditions. I think the only outstanding item from my perspective is that, as you'll recall, we had proposed some work along the roadway, right-of-way edge, to help alleviate not only existing flooding, but there was a very de minimis amount of water that was leaving our site via the driveway. And certainly no one wants to contribute or increase the flooding in that area. So we proposed some improvements along the shoulder of the roadway, which came about in conjunction and discussion with the DPW folks. Horsley Witten has opined that they think our solution is acceptable and a good one. I know we are still waiting to hear final response from the DPW. I don't know if Erica heard anything, but
I did talk to the DPW director today, and in your packet is an email from him, and he's basically signed up on the design, including the recommendations from Horsley Witten.
okay. So good, we were able to come full circle with respect to that. So at this point, we are not of the understanding that we need to provide any further information to Horsley Witten, and we are in agreement with their final letter and conclusions. With that, let me go through the items that were listed in the agenda, and I'll give you an update and in some cases some data. And unfortunately, in 2 cases, I'd like to start with the 2 issues that I'm a little behind the 8 ball on. There were 2 things that I had committed to getting done, which I have to admit up front here that I did not get them done. However, they will both be done this week. I have been working on them. One is to come back full circle with the Architectural Design Review Board. The board had asked us if we had finished that process, or had asked us to finish that process. You recall we went and met with the Architectural Design Review Board. They gave us a lot of feedback, a lot of suggestions. We did in fact integrate many of the comments that they gave to us, but what we failed to do is provide a complete listing of feedback and new drawings to the Design Review Board to reflect the changes we made. So that's what I'm putting together, is a report of what their comments were originally, what comments we've integrated into the plan, and provide them an updated plan. And again, that commentary, so that I would expect or hope what will happen is the Design Review Board will review that and then potentially have comments for this board. I can't say we're expecting to go back and continue our debate with them or our discussion with them. Quite frankly, they were very forthcoming with their comments originally, and as I said, we tried to introduce as many of them as we can. I think the 2 that we didn't introduce were some window treatments that were suggested, and the colors of the units themselves. The other thing that I am admittedly behind on, and I do have some questions for the board, is the board said you'd like to see some draft condominium documents. I suspect part of the reason you want to see those is to be sure that we integrate certain conditions and requirements that we've discussed. Like, I know the board has had, and maybe it was the abutters, had concerns about, well, who's going to maintain the drainage system? Who's going to maintain the septic systems? Who's going to make sure that no fertilizers or pesticides are used, no salt? Who's going to monitor that? We've pretty much been universal in our answer that there will be a very well-structured condominium association which will be responsible for all of that, as is typical. So what I can do in giving you draft documents is that I can try and integrate as many of those maintenance types things that are in my notes, but it's more typical, or at least what I see more often, is the board provides a requirement that prior to building permits, we provide condo docs for the town to review. And the reason for that is that typically within a decision of the board, you may have a number of issues or a number of things that you require be put in those docs. So while I can sort of not guess at it, but I can certainly derive most of them from my notes, I don't know if there will be others that you will include in a decision that would be conditions relative to those docs. So I guess somewhat premature in giving them to you, but if you want them, I can provide you a draft copy. I'm just saying it's more typical that we see a requirement that you get the condo docs prior to any building permits, so that you can ensure that any conditions under your comprehensive permit and/or even Board of Health or conservation permits are shown in those docs. But in any event, I can get you some draft docs in the next week. I apologize they're not done, but please understand they may likely have some holes.
But that's understood, but I think we have in the past in the 40s.
Okay, you want
Instead
to
of
see them
waiting
now?
yeah, because then we can start incorporating, and it is a discussion point of, you say, well, no, that doesn't belong in a condo doc. We're not attorneys, but we
Right.
have input on what's coming in front of us, so we want to be sure that at least what we've heard for comments are in there.
Okay.
Once they go to construction or getting for the building permit time, sometimes we're not as involved unless we have to get called back into meetings.
Okay.
So then we may be under the gun and it's not fresh in our minds.
I've already started them,
Yeah.
so I will finish them
Mhm.
this week. It's just, they're drafts,
Yeah.
and I will put in whatever maintenance requirements we've discussed today.
Yeah, no, right, and that's important. We'll see it and we'll say, okay, at least it's indicative of what we've seen to date and, you know.
No, I'm happy to get them, to finish them out. So, and I do apologize, I have no excuse other than the fact that just a lot going on and a lot to do. I haven't been able to finish those two things. I have finished a number of things though.
Okay.
So let me go through.
One question, were you going to provide a revised list of waivers?
Yes.
Okay. So that's part
I
of
have that.
all right. Yep.
Yep, I'll go through that list for you.
All right, great.
Recall, one of the things we've sort of said all along here is we were really focusing on getting the engineering review completed so that we can now, for better or worse, rely on the design that is on those plans. So I have now been able to do, or Seth's been able to do, an incredibly detailed breakdown of waivers down to the feet, inches. And of course, all of those waivers are now based on the final plan that we're dealing with after the final peer review engineer. So just to run through some of the action item lists from the last meeting that are on your agenda. We were asked to give you a revised landscaping plan. That was submitted with the revised engineering plans that were previously submitted since we last met. As we kind of touched on earlier, the design of the Still River Road culvert has been completed, integrated onto the plans, reviewed by Horsley, and now we're hearing the DPW director is comfortable with that design. So those updated plans were provided. We were asked to remove the retaining wall. It turns out that the retaining wall, as originally shown, came actually and crossed the right-of-way line. That has been pulled back and reviewed by Horsley for accuracy, so we did provide that new plan. One of the things that we have been discussing, and probably, I don't know, I don't believe it was announced publicly, although it has been provided in the last couple of submissions that we made in terms of plan revisions to Horsley Witten, and that is with respect to nitrogen pretreatment. We've talked about the use of nitrogen reduction technology to help further enhance public safety, and we actually did provide a proposed design to Horsley Witten as part of the redesigned plans, showing that we will employ nitrogen reduction system in our septic systems. We provided Horsley a proposed system. It's a system that has been approved for general use by DEP. It's a off-the-shelf nitrogen reduction system that DEP is allowing us to use. And so we have put that on the plans, and we have committed to employ that nitrogen reduction systems within the septic systems. So I think that was a big improvement and certainly a big change to our plans. Now, just so that we all understand, we do at some point, assuming, well, I won't assume anything, but in the normal process of a project like this, we would be going to not only your Conservation Commission, but your Board of Health for approvals of that system. And so that nitrogen reduction system is all part of the design that we will be asking your Board of Health to review for consistency with Title V and the local bylaws to the extent we haven't asked for a waiver. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we need to employ the nitrogen reduction to meet Title V. We're doing that as in response to multiple requests to do so, just to make the systems that much more protective. So we have committed to do that. You asked about waivers. We were able this week to redo the waivers. I brought copies. I know it's the meeting, I don't expect you to look at them or discuss them, but I did want to bring you copies just so you can see they exist. We'll formally submit multiple copies and copy the conservation and everyone tomorrow morning with them. But I do have them, so you can put one in the record. Oh, actually, I have a whole bunch of them. So. But you'll see that is a complete relisting of all waivers, most of which have been given a lot more detail, significant detail. One of the open issues we had was with respect to the fire department. I know the board has received a letter from the fire department stating that they are accepting of us sprinkling the buildings. There was a comment there that they had required that we provide better access to the buildings, and I believe the chief thanked us for making those changes, so he's accepted those changes. The last issue he had was that he asked that we allow him to inspect the H20 loading, the installation of that system, so that he can verify that we're putting enough soil. He just wants to know that that the H20 loading,
That was the grid system?
yeah,
So that nothing
can crush, right? So it's heavy. It's heavy enough to accept the largest firefighting apparatus. So my feeling is we've committed to that, to allow him those inspections. Or he said he just wanted a written verification from the engineers. We're happy to do both. So I do believe at this point that we're done with the fire department, at least until it's time for inspections. The board had asked the other day, there was a question raised the other day regarding the fact that we had a development entity, Still River Road Development, as you know, is the development entity seeking this permit, and yet we had Left Turn LLC, or Turn Left LLC, a Massachusetts limited liability company that is the owner of the property, and the question was asked, how do these two, how does the land transfer? And it's a simple answer, and I brought you a copy of the documents. There is a signed purchase and sales agreement between Turn Left LLC and Still River Road Development for the transfer of the property for the project purposes. And if you check, and I brought you copies of that, if you'll check, or if you want to check, you'll see that the purchase price of the property between the entities is consistent with the appraisal and the designation made by the state. As you know, the state dictates what you can pay for your property or what you can claim as a purchase price as part of your pro forma. And our pro forma that was reviewed and approved by the state is reflective of the $205,000 purchase price that's shown on the purchase and sales agreement. So in essence, the owner, Turn Left LLC, will be conveying the property to Still River Road Development. And I don't think it's a surprise to anyone, but there's common principles amongst those entities. But the board wants to.
Is this property what is used for site control? Or is this that is given to the state?
Yeah, and then the state sent an appraiser out. The appraiser appraises the property, and we're not allowed to use, we are required to use the lesser of the purchase price between the entities or the state's appraised value. This reflects the state's appraised value. so it's a lower price, but it's all we're allowed to use for purchase prices. So that's dictated by the state. The other two agenda items that you had, and we're happy to answer any questions you have, in that I think they're both, they speak for themselves, and that is the Conservation Commission letter as well as the Board of Selectmen letters. Those are letters from those entities to this board. As you can expect, we're not necessarily in agreement with those letters, and certainly I'm thrilled about what they say in terms of, suggesting that the board do not grant waivers or approve the project. But I do not have any formal response to those letters. I think we have discussed the conservation issues at length. And as far as the Board of Selectmen letter, I don't want to stand here and, I could argue their letter if that's what the board wants to hear, but they've made assumptions and conclusions, and they have every right to do that. So I feel that letter is a communication between the Board of Selectmen and this board for your consideration. While I don't agree with it, they have every right to give it to you. So, but I'm certainly happy to answer any specific questions you have about the letters, or if you do want to hear what my
I just
response
wanted to
is.
drag up an whole point we've been around, and we still don't have any input on the environmental impact of this. And it's very difficult as a board, for me personally, to assess the ability of, the town to accept this project and weigh it against the environmental consequences of doing so. And without that information, we're pretty much in blind territory, so.
All right, then let me answer that, and I'm glad you asked that question, because I did have more to say about that. One of the things that was asked for in the conservation letter, and I believe Mr. Pesnola reiterated it in his letter, was a request for some baseline information concerning the amount of 25-foot no disturb area on the site, the percentage of that we were proposing to impact, and I assume there was a couple other points. And I'm actually in a moment going to let Seth speak to that, because we did actually do those calculations for you, and Seth did finish them up today. We will submit those two formally tomorrow so that you have them for your record. But I just want to say, I know this has been an ongoing discussion. And while I know it's not a satisfactory answer, we have always had the position that, we didn't come onto this site entirely blind with respect to resource areas. The commission had approved an order of conditions for the construction of a single-family home on this site. In doing so, they identified, verified the resource areas on the site. They issued an order of conditions based on that their findings. At the time that we filed for this permit, that order of conditions, that delineation were valid. I don't think we were unreasonable in relying on that in developing what are supposed to be preliminary plans for a 40B process. However, that was called into question early on. There were inspections done out there, potential new wetlands were found, and we've been asked to come in and redelineate the wetlands, go to the conservation, go through that process. That process had been done less than 2 years prior to us filing. We've said all along that once we get the project finalized, buildings stop moving around, we would be filing with conservation, and we're going to do that. The other thing is, as you know, we have asked for some waivers from your local bylaws. And now you have excruciatingly detailed information on those waivers. Without knowing if or whether we have those waivers or not, I can't file with the Conservation Commission. Because the project as proposed without waivers doesn't meet some of your local setbacks. So I'm gonna walk into a board without waivers in hand, and I'm gonna get denied. I don't see any other outcome if I don't have waivers. The commission's gonna impose their local regulations as they should. This is a 40B. We get exemptions from local bylaws if we can meet specific standards. We think we've met them. We even went so far as to have an outside third-party, well-respected wetland scientist group come in and redo the lines for us again to make sure they're right. And they've done that, although we haven't fully surveyed because of the weather.
All the relevant portions.
Just the echo.
But all of the relevant portions that are adjacent to the project have been done. And we even updated our plan using those new lines and new areas.
Just the echo tech?
Yes. So, and we've based our waiver requests on that new line, which, to the extent their line was more conservative, we used it. To the extent they thought maybe the line could have pushed away, we stuck with the original line. So we're very confident that our line is solid, and we will find out soon enough when we go to conservation. But right now, without waivers, I mean, I know it's a chicken and an egg for you, and I apologize, but given the fact that we've given you yet an updated delineation based on the Ecotech work, Seth is about to give you, and we will submit in writing tomorrow, all of that information you asked for regarding setbacks and intrusion into the setbacks as a percentage of the whole and all that. We've done all those calculations. So that may give you some baseline information. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's no getting around the fact that we are asking to be closer than 25 feet in some spots. And I think only in the spots that we have to be, without losing a building or without losing the project. So, you know, I apologize that that hasn't gone the way you might have liked it to go, but again, it's not like we came in here blind. I mean, there was a delineation made by the commission, and even though people don't feel this way, the delineation of the wetlands should be the same whether you're building one structure, 8 structures, or 100 structures. The resource areas are what they are. So I don't think anyone's saying that, well, yeah, we did the delineation for the single-family home, but where you're building more than that, we're going to do a different delineation. I mean, that isn't the way it works.
No, delineation, you know, the delineation is what it is, but the project certainly is vastly larger than what was originally proposed.
Correct.
And I also would like to add that Horsley went and questioned your wetland line, and that's really what triggered this, because it was questioned.
And we brought in a new
And you did, which is great. But I'd also like to make it clear to the board too, now that we have a revised wetland line that's changed, you know, in terms of the 25-foot no disturb, now we have a building within that location, and that wasn't there before. So that changes things a little bit too.
There was always a building within the 25 feet of wetlands on the original plans.
There was?
Yeah. It is closer now. Undoubtedly, there was an area that came out a little bit, and we've used a more conservative delineation on that. If it's all right, if it's all right, I can speak to some of those numbers that we were requested to
Could you show
provide.
me, please?
Sure.
So here's your 25-foot line here.
We're losing that right there. You have the deck is, see the 25 there.
Okay, but that's significantly different.
Okay, without a doubt.
You can't even, I actually, looking at that, you almost can't even tell.
It's 24 and change to 7 feet and change is the
Yeah.
difference
See
between
here,
the
you have an
deck.
actual, you know, beyond the deck, you have an actual
Yeah, without a doubt.
building area.
Yeah, but it's, well, to the question of the areas that we were requested to provide. And as Attorney Shane says, we will provide this in writing to the board.
So this is the 25-foot line, so you can clearly see now
Yeah.
there's additional
Well,
areas.
is the old line?
The old line, unfortunately, I don't have a large plan of it that's highlighted, but the 25-foot line previously was here. It's significantly different.
Yeah, okay.
But what's his point, you said there was no building.
So he's saying the deck right here, this
Oh,
deck,
that's
was
the
I mean,
deck.
it's really, minimal
And
compared
so
to.
now
what
we
it
have
is now.
unit 2 as well as the deck for unit 1, which is,
On the deck here.
Yeah.
well, this and the deck
Deck,
for
right,
2.
right. Mhm.
And just for unit 1, it's just the deck.
And you have
Mhm.
substantially more grading, you have more clearing, so
Mhm.
it's definitely more of an impact.
So the letter we just gave you actually spells it out foot by
Yeah, I saw
foot,
that.
unit by unit. So we can go through that in detail if you like, or if you like, I can go ahead with the numbers that Mr. Piznola and I believe the Conservation Commission asked us to provide.
I proceed as however you were anticipating to proceed, but just let's make sure we cover the,
Yeah, I think they coincide actually, so we've talked about the size of the site at length, so that's outlined on this board here. It goes all the way to the Harvard Town line. Total is just over 290,000 square feet, and our project area is 45,770 square feet. And that project area actually stemmed, it's this red line that goes around the perimeter of our site, and that was what was more or less previously approved by Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. So while we have more units in there, we're using essentially the same work area for that. The wetlands are around the perimeter on all sides except the Still River Road side, and we've outlined foot by foot what each unit will need as well as what other portions of the infrastructure will need in the letter that we submitted. So on the site, we're proposing now to alter 2,610 square feet of the 25-foot buffer zone. So that's less than 1% of the site.
so
And
is
then-
it just, is this the February 5th letter?
No, we're gonna submit a new letter to
Oh,
you
okay, so
spelling
it's a
all
no-
these out,
okay,
yeah,
perfect, all right.
and whatever detail you need on that.
Mhm.
And then the area, the remainder of the site, much of the site is within the 100-foot buffer zone. So that would almost total up almost all of our 45,000 square feet of alterations, with the exception of 800 square feet, which is outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. So no matter how you cut it at the site, whether it's a single-family home, whether it was 20 units, whether it's the proposed 8 units, you're going to have almost the same buffer zone alterations here. And that's because the work area was previously approved and we're using the same work area. And so we spelled out what each unit's gonna need for distances. Some of them are quite a bit more than what others are. We spelled out what our infrastructure, including our septic systems, they're gonna need for a setback in that letter as well. And that's down to the foot now. So whereas before we were asking for a broad-based waiver, and that was partially because we were going through reviews with Horsley and Witten, we've completed those now, so we can spell it out exactly what we need. And that's what's been done in that letter. So again, we're looking at an over 6-acre site, and we're using just over 1 acre of it. So I appreciate that it's environmentally sensitive, but putting aside a massive portion like that's significant environmental benefit. It's putting aside a significant portion of land that will not be used. And then if I could quickly touch on some of the Horsley and Witten reviews as well. Did you want to do a butter comment now, or should we wait? Up to you.
I don't want you to get sidetracked on what the discussion is, so,
This is right to this point, if you don't mind.
okay. So
I'm Eric
I don't want
Johnson.
to just, well, I'll let this one, but I don't want to
Yeah.
get too much, interrupt his flow as far as what he's going to present.
I'm Eric Johnson, Still River Road, directly across the street. He just referred to the footprint and the single-family home. The single-family home needed no waivers. It was not in violation of any zoning, they needed no variances. So to make an analogy between 8 units, the septic system for 8 units, the covering of, driveways and everything for 8 units, all the waivers, all the variances, everything else he's looking for, the single-family home needed none of that. They needed to comply with all of the town laws.
Thank you.
One of the things we were asked to do as part of the Horsley and Wetland Review was to incorporate some drainage improvements in Still River Road. We've shown that at the driveway entrance, and we're proposing a collection system here. It'll pipe under our driveway, and then there's a forebay, so that's going to be an area that allows any contaminants, not from our site, but anything that was coming down the road salt, anything like that. So it's generally going to be an improvement to the area, and Horsley and Witten has suggested a couple ideas that could be incorporated into that. As Attorney DeShane mentioned, we have no problem incorporating those. One of those would be a paved apron at the entrance to that to force runoff into there. And the other one, we have a small earthen berm at the outfall, and she recommended, I believe, a granite or a concrete, essentially a divider there at a set elevation that will allow any type of sediment to settle out, and then at a predefined point it'll overflow. So that's a very good improvement to that area as a whole. And now I understand the DPW director is also in concert with that. And then one of the final things we were asked in response to some of the abutter comments, Attorney DeShane touched on it, we have a revised landscape plan in our plan set now, and we've switched all the plantings in that plan to be things that are designated as native species within Massachusetts by the USDA. So those are all plants that would be naturally found in our environment. We're specifying over 40 plantings on the site. It'll greatly enhance the visual look of the site as well. So that was it, as I said, and Attorney DeShane mentioned we'll be submitting those exact numbers to you, to Erica via email with hard copies to follow. If you have any questions regarding them, I'm happy to address them.
So Ecotech, did you submit documents to Erica? Is that-
Not yet, no.
Not yet. So we had some comments from conservation on questions reviewing the updated plans, and they referenced Ecotech. Are those from you? So, do those need to be addressed now, or is that when we get their
They
updated
can be, I
documents?
think it was just with updated copies, basically, when you flags change or things like that, you submit the documentation that shows how they did it, what their standards were, and typically it's the same, but it's just proof of how it was carried out. And in this case, where you are adding a wetland area, for significantly increasing the resource area on site, it's important to just include that and have it.
So your comments are, you're looking for that information, or?
Yeah, I think it would be important for the board to just have on file. And then the other question was, which may be addressed now, Mr. Chairman, if appropriate. Basically, on the general notes, it states that very specific flags on one side of the parcel or project area was delineated, and I was just curious why the opposite side hadn't been, or if they had delineated and it just ended up being the exact same.
Actually, weather conditions prevented the rearmost portion of the site from being completed at this time. So those are all further away than any of the relief we're requesting though. So everything that's adjacent to or relevant to a setback that we're requesting has been redelineated, and then it obviously snowed, and some of that work was not able to be completed, but it does not impact the waivers that we're requesting, nor is any of those flags going to be closer to any of the units or any of the improvements that we're proposing. So the list you have represents what we would need to construct this project. The other portions are going to be further away from that.
Does that make sense to you?
Yes, I think though, what I was really, because I understood that, and I know there's the perennial stream in question, things like that, but it's actually the southwestern side, is what.
I think
Yes,
everything around to about here and on this side, all the way almost connecting back to it, was redelineated. And
Okay.
those are reflected on the current plans.
Okay,
So the portion that hasn't been is back in this corner here, which is quite a bit away from the site.
okay, that was just unclear, I think, on the plans.
Okay.
So can we compile, is it Ecotech's field notes?
Yeah, so the data sheets are filled.
I can see if weather allowed them to complete data sheets. I know they have 2 observation plots out there.
Yep.
I do not know if there was sufficient time to do that, but I can check on that, and if so, provide that to you.
So Seth, is that why the 25-foot no disturb line on the updated plan shows a disconnect? Because you don't have the wetland delineated
I believe
or
it's,
shown now?
there's a point we note
I was
that
trying to trace it, it's very hard to follow.
it does go all the way through. There's a lot of lines on the plan, obviously,
Mhm.
but it does go all the way through. I can highlight that on the plan and send it over to you.
Okay. Yeah, right in here, it looked like there was a disconnect. The line stopped here, and then this one continued all the way around here.
It might just be an issue with the PDF. It should go all the way through. The green line is correct, and I believe the 25-foot buffer from those green lines should almost touch. There should be a couple foot opening in them, that's it.
Can we check that plan and reproduce that and give copies of everyone to make sure they have? That one shows all of the setbacks in color, is that?
I colored this myself.
did that.
Yeah, and I was, to be honest with you, it was very hard to highlight, and I have a technical background because the line types didn't come through when you printed the plans. So it was very difficult to understand which lines were which.
I'll give you a
I
colored.
did my best.
I'll give
and
you
I
a
think I-
colored one from the
Okay.
computer, that way there's no
Um,
miscommunication.
Do you mind if I ask one more question?
No, no problem.
And Rebecca actually brought this to my attention today when we were looking at it together. Now with the new wetland line, it appears that some of the area that was proposed as mitigation area under the NISA filing
Mhm.
is no longer, it's now wetland.
Correct.
So how is that how do you think that's gonna impact things moving forward?
Well,
the
Natural Heritage is gonna have to re-review this with
Yeah.
the new work line and make a new determination of whether or not we are gonna need a conservation management permit, or whether or not the revised work area, which will have to show new restoration or replication areas if it's changed. They're gonna make a call. We're gonna have to send this to them. In fact, now that our plans are as final as they're gonna be, we've actually started putting that package together too. So Natural Heritage is gonna get a re-review of this. No question about it.
Just a couple more
Nope.
plans, I
No,
apologize. Horsley went and did have a comment in their latest report about the contours, the labeling, and potentially the contours themselves might be inaccurate around the buildings and where the boulders are. And I think that probably happened when you put in the stairs for the fire department. I was looking at them today and I agree that it doesn't really quite make sense. So that should get updated.
We have no problem with that.
Yeah. And then I guess my only question to the board is whether or not you'd want Sharman-Dills looking to see if they could pull that unit 2 more out of the 25-foot no disturb at this point. I don't know if that's possible. but-
The 2 units where the decks and the.
Yeah, now that it's
I mean-
encroaching more in that
Mhm.
25-foot, that might be something that the board would want to
Mhm.
consider is having them ship some of this work out of there. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, is it possible to remove the deck?
We can look at the entirety of Erica's question,
Mhm.
if that unit can be moved forward.
Or angle differently, or just, I mean, anything that can keep it outside of,
It wouldn't just be the deck, it would be
Right.
the entire foundation.
right, on this one here, right, yeah. with it,
I don't think they'd swing it this way.
Right, right, yeah.
For the most part, it seems that they're staying out of the 25-foot buffer. If you follow the line, there's not, the development stays out, and then it's really down in here, so they could do anything in this area. So that we're trying to meet the wetland bylaws as best we can.
Probably in the 25.
I would think,
The deck's
Mhm. It's the best time to at least try to attack.
We will, we'll take a closer look at that, and we'll at least give you a written response as to what we can or can't do.
Right.
Seth has some ideas for this.
So
And then
we
the
do
only-
need, do you need to send them a letter asking them to do, or is this just what you've asked now is fine?
Yeah,
Just
I'm
the
just
document.
kind of
We're-
stating my
right.
recommendation to the board. It's up to the board whether or not you want them to look into that, I suppose.
But I think it makes sense to.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
makes sense to
you're-
me,
You're the
considering-
town planner, and, you know, so.
Yeah.
We're writing it down,
Okay.
and we're assuming we're gonna answer them all.
That would be great. And then just one last plan comment. At one point, you were gonna identify if there were trees within the road right of way that needed to be removed. I don't know that that ever got addressed.
They are on the DPW plan,
Okay.
so we're showing, I believe there's two there, one might be a twin, so double trunk, and then there's two on this side, but the driveway itself does not require.
Okay, so the development itself doesn't require
Correct,
trees
so-
to be taken down?
And truthfully, if you take a look at the frontage of that site, it's mostly choked with bittersweet. There's a couple, probably what we consider hazard trees in that area, but we would complete that filing with, actually, are you the tree warden?
It's Mark Casey's issue.
Okay,
But
so
I
we-
work with him.
So we would complete that filing if the board were to choose to approve the Still River Road drainage improvements. But in short, the driveway itself does not require the removal of any trees within the right of way.
So you would, if the board's amenable to the drainage plan, you would then put forward an application for a shade tree hearing?
Correct.
Okay.
Does the DPW director need to sign that, or, I mean, we file on their behalf because it's the right of way. Okay. Just, we're happy to do it, I just wanna make sure that, he's okay with us
Oh, I'm sure you would be fine with that,
on
yeah.
for his property technically.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can double check with them.
That's, unless you need details on something, we covered a lot of the Horseland technical reviews. I will say that one of the things that we've been asked to do throughout the technical review by Horseland Whitman, they've looked at a lot of the stormwater management features on the site, and we have to model those features to hold a certain volume of water, and that's what a lot of the letters back and forth have been regarding. Taking a look at how that was done, how everything was sized, and to make sure that the components can hold the specified amount of water for various storm events. And so that's, in the last Horsley review letter, they've agreed that the system is appropriately sized at this point, and it meets their criteria as well. So this is seeing a third-party review now that shows that the site's gonna contain its stormwater management and treat it in accordance with the state regulations as well.
So your February 5th letter to Joe Lynch, Director DPW. So Eric, email from the 19th where Joe Lynch
Just today, yeah.
says, this looks good. Is that in response to the February 5th
Correct.
letter?
Yeah, he came into my office and we reviewed it together, and then he said, oh, I'll send you a quick, email stating that I approved the plan, including the Horsley Witten recommendations.
So that's fine.
He's good with it.
So less progress on that front.
So on the plans, it has Turn Left LLC listed as the owner and the applicant is Still River Road, but on the PNS, it has Turn Left already sold it to Still River Road Development on April 1st of last year.
No,
Is this
that's,
just a mistake on?
April 1st is the date of the purchase and sales agreement.
Right. So who actually owns the property now?
Turn left.
Okay. So Turn Left owns it and Still River Road is developing it.
Yes.
And the PNS just hasn't. So they haven't closed it yet?
No,
Okay.
no. It's,
All right,
it's
so-
subject to, when someone does a 40B project. You will always create a single-purpose entity as your development entity for the project, because remember, that entity has to declare itself a limited dividend company
Right,
that can only earn certain amount of profit.
right,
You would never use a development company that you use to do other projects or to own land or, you know, that you're using for other business purposes and other uses. You would never use that entity for your 40B because you're declaring that it's a limited dividend company and its profits are limited, and yet you're using it for other activities. So what we always see, without question, at least I do, is the developers will create a separate entity, which, the sole purpose of which is to be the developer and limited dividend company for the development of the 40B project. And you almost always have a purchase and sales agreement between the landowner and that development company to purchase the property. And one of the things, when the state does your site eligibility analysis, is they will ask, under what legal structure do you control the property? And just having a purchase and sales agreement with a property owner constitutes control
okay,
for purposes of site
okay,
review.
all right.
And quite frankly, if this doesn't play out the way we hope it does, Left Turn will probably either develop that property on its own as a for-profit developer or sell it to some other entity.
Mm.
But Still River Road development, right now, it owns nothing other than legal obligations to buy. And it's got the, and it's seeking these permits.
And so this establishes site control.
That establishes a control,
Okay.
sure. It's just, to be honest, just a purchase and sales agreement between two
Okay.
parties, saying, we'll sell you this piece for $207,000.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm the whole site
Yeah,
control.
no, it's fine, no, it's a good question.
Can I just kind of add, or ask another question on top of that?
Sure.
So you had said that the land value and the pro forma is the lesser of the value between the purchase price and the appraisal?
Well, when you originally file your pro forma as part of your site eligibility application, you usually use whatever value you've assigned to the property. Like the property cost $200,000, and you would put it in there. Or maybe you are the owner of the property, you've already negotiated a deal. It's not a related entity, it's just some property owner. And they want X dollars for their property, you sign the purchase and sales agreement to pay that. What happens though is when you file all of that with the state, they will, you're required to have the property appraised and an appraised value put on it. And it's not the appraised value as a 40B, it's the by right value. So somewhere along the lines, in our case, the state appraiser concluded that lot, which is a by right single-family residence lot, is worth $207,000. Ultimately, when you do your final accounting and you put together your final pro forma to show the state, what you sold it for, what it cost, and they do an audit of your project to make sure that you're within your 20% limitation, you have to use the number they assign. And so, like I said, their number is the lesser of whatever arm's length number you agreed to and their appraised value. You have to choose the lowest one. I mean, quite frankly, where did that all come from? Many years ago, people would inflate the price that they were paying for the property because they're limited to 20% profit. That 20% is based on total input into the project, what you paid for the land, what you paid your lawyers, what you paid your engineers, what you paid, every dime, what it cost you to build it, what it cost you to market it, what it cost you to sell them, okay? At the end of the day, when that's all done, we have to produce a report for the state which they audit. And they want to make sure that you don't make more than 20%. Well, if I put in that I was paying $500,000 for my property, you know, that's a big number that I can write off as an expense. So the state just wants to make sure nobody's playing games with the land, because I believe early on, you know, some 15, 20 years ago when 40Bs were really starting to take off, people were manipulating numbers. So that's why we're required to follow the state's appraisal.
So the number that's in the purchase and sale is
That's the state number.
the state number.
Mhm.
Because Turnlap purchased the property in 2018
Okay.
for $172,000.
Mhm.
So, I'm just trying to understand the number,
Right.
that's all.
The purchase and sales number that's used to compare to the appraised value would be the agreed purchase price between the development entity and Left Turn. In our case, we just use the state number. Would Left Turn have liked to have sold the property to Still River Road Development for $300,000? I'm sure it would have. But it's limited to the 207 that the state determined.
For the benefit of the audience, 'cause, well, most of the documents that you've received in tonight have been spoken by your attorney or Seth. There was reference to the Board of Selectmen's letter. Is that in the, like, on the website and the documents? In case people had interest in this letter?
I need to get it on the town's website, because I just received it today. So I have sent it to the applicant, to the board, and some butters that I got emails for, but I don't think I have it on the website yet.
So, but just so, to reiterate what Attorney Shane said, that the selectmen did hold a hearing at the June 24th, 2019 hearing, and they summarized 4 points where they ultimately concluded that their recommendation to this board is to deny the project because they don't believe it is the right type of development for the unique and environment central property. So that's part of the record, and so we'll have it on the website. And then I want to acknowledge also, we had a input today from Robert Martell, and it was led to the zoning board regarding the Still River Commons 40B development proposal, and very detailed letter on his recommendation about what he would hope we consider as we get closer to a decision to address areas of health, site design, open space, and whatnot. So thank you for the letter, and we'll certainly. I did scan through it, but as again, some of these things come in right before we come to a meeting, so it's hard to get through them all. But we'll look at it, and it'll be part of the record. So we'll have a lot of new reading for tomorrow, it looks like.
Yes, and just to be clear, Mr. Chairman, I've committed to the architectural design report and the condo doc report, or the condo doc, draft condo docs. Seth is going to provide updated or colored copies of the wetland delineation plans. We will also talk with
Ecotech about what we have or what they can give us in terms of field notes or data sheets to justify their modifications to the line. I'm just making sure, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Updated topo around the building and stairs. And we're gonna take a look at what we can do to minimize 25-foot setback intrusions of those 2 units. I think we answered the tree question, correct? That's not a deliverable? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So how soon do you think you will have that submission for some, just, you're aware that we have a March 22nd is our deadline to
Yeah,
close the hearing and then deliver it on, so we have to start. I don't wanna get a lot of things in, like, on,
Right.
set a meeting date
Yeah.
to say middle of March, and then we're getting on the end of the day, it's due.
We
It's
can
our first,
commit to have everything to you by the end of next week.
So, yeah.
Today's the 19th. So that's the 29th, is next Friday?
Next Friday, so.
Whatever a week from Friday is, you'll have it all before then, by then.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, I have a question about this berm business.
Mhm.
So on the back page, it talks about on the north side of Still River Commons entrance, the applicant has proposed a 4-bay with a berm set at elevation 228.7. Stormwater which collects in the 4-bay will overtop the 8-foot wide berm and flow towards the wetland resource area approximately 25 feet away. HW has found that many DPWs have extra granite and so forth. So, can you show me where this is? Where is this proposed berm? And also, what's going to be flowing down there? Is that at the low point? Like everything's going to be sheeting off of the driveways and going down to that area? What's going to be flowing down to that area where the berm is?
I'll put it up. Yeah. This thing's a little right. So there's 2 views on this plan, so we'll start with the one that gives you a bigger picture of the area. Drainage is generally coming down Still River Road from about this point. There's very little gutter here. There's basically a berm, some vegetation that come down almost to the edge of pavement. And then the pavement goes down and continues down towards the Harbor Town line. So we're proposing to collect some of that runoff right in this area. The first of Horsley and Whitman's comment was to add an improved apron there. We're showing some large riprap in that area.
Okay.
But they want to have an actual bituminous apron to guide some of the runoff in there. So we're agreeable to that. So we'll be capturing the runoff that's coming from the road there. It'll be conveyed through a pipe, which is going to go under our proposed driveway. And then there's a small basin on this side of a 4-bay that allows anything to settle out, any contaminants to settle out. And they're proposing to add the granite right in this section here. So basically that comes in and there's a defined low point, and it's designed to overtop at a certain volume. And so they're proposing that using the extra granite, I've seen it done with concrete, there's a variety to do it. We're just showing earth, which is fine, but if they would prefer, or if you would prefer to have a hardened device there, then we can have that at a set elevation that long term, it would probably allow that area to remain more defined. If the DPW were to choose to do maintenance on it, it would prevent anything from lowering that berm if that device is in place there.
Okay.
So when that water's flowing down, isn't that going toward the river that's down that way?
Right now, if you took our project out of the picture, everything from about this point down flows all the way to just past the Harbor Town line, it looks like. And then because the road's crowned, it looks like a lot of the runoff ends up in the wetlands in that area there. So we're proposing to prevent some of that and allow for some form of treatment to that as well. It should be noted that as you go further down, the pavement surface of Still River Road is actually below the floodplain elevation, whereas we're above here. So treating it in this area is preferable. So if the water were to come up, we would be above that level, allowing for that area to still function and have an appropriate overflow point.
But
But we should understand the genesis of this whole thing, because you asked about, is this system being put in place to collect our water from our driveway and deal with it? I think the answer for the most part is no. The problem was, and correct me if I'm wrong, sir, the problem was that we have a de minimis amount of water from the end of our driveway that would flow this way.
Correct.
And by de minimis, what was it?
It was decimals of cubic foot per second.
Decimals of a cubic foot. Oh, you know, de minimis would not really have had any physical effect on the current situation on Stillwater Road. But technically, the law says you can add 0. So even 1/100th of 1 cubic feet is more than 0, you gotta deal with it. So we had suggested that we could put an interceptor or a pipe or a drain or something right here that would catch our little de minimis amount of water and make us compliant. In talking with the DPW director about that, and, you know, and with Horsley Witten as a, you know, as a way to address our de minimis amount, it was thought, well, if you're gonna do something here, perhaps there's more you could do that would not only, you know, satisfy your de minimis amount, but also help, you know, kind of improve what's going on here. And that's where this larger scale system, which is now picking up water from Stillwater Road here, right?
Correct.
Right? I mean, this basin is not gonna pick up ours goes that way, right? A little bit there.
It'll go
We might get a little
very
this way.
small in there, yeah.
But the point is, you know, this whole idea was sort of grew from us having to solve our little problem, and is there a way to do that and maybe make things better here? I mean, we have heard, and it's not untrue, that there's, you know, there's drainage and water problems there today. We've tried to show, and we've certainly said it, I don't know, you know, if everyone agrees, but we've tried to show where we're not going to contribute anything to that problem. We can't. You know, by law, the stormwater requires we don't. So we've proven that, but at the same time, I think we've come to a great solution with the DPW and Horsley Witten for a mechanism that may actually help, not gonna solve the problems, but help the bigger problem.
So that berm isn't immediately adjacent to any paved surface there? That's on down a little bit? Is that what you're saying?
Which berm?
The one
This-
that's gonna have the overtopping,
So the edge of the pavement
right,
would be right in this area here,
right?
and the
I mean,
road,
for this development, for the
Ye-
development itself.
it's within the town's way, and
Okay,
it would be privately constructed. So
Okay.
the applicant is going to pay for the construction of this,
Okay.
not the town or the
Okay.
DPW.
okay, yeah,
Under the direction and oversight of the DPW.
okay. I guess my question was, it's not going to be right beside the pavement of the development, so all the water isn't going to be just washing all of this stuff from the cars into this berm where it overtops and then goes into the wetland?
Well, no, show them how our drainage here is handled.
Yeah, we do, we have a specialized catch basin in this area, and that's gonna catch the majority of the runoff from the project as a whole.
Okay,
And then this small portion of the driveway is gonna go to this catch basin, and there's a specialized trench drain to catch anything that bypasses
And
that.
it pulls all that back this way.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
So the only thing we're talking about is this area between right here, right?
Correct.
That would go this way.
And it's important to note, even a single-family home driveway would have a very similar impact on Still River Road itself. Once you go over a 4-unit development, you're held to a higher set of stormwater standards, which this project is, but a single-family home wouldn't have that. So there would be no form of treatment, or there'd be no form of mitigation for that, or at least required by the state permitting.
So this, if this were a single-family home driveway, it could technically drain all of here out to the street.
Yeah, realistically, I think the town,
Wouldn't let
they
that
would
happen.
want something different, but this is held to a higher standard of regulations that's been implemented.
okay.
And it looks like these, whatever, if something ultimately is built here, it'll incorporate, the DPW's review and approval of how that ultimately.
Yeah, it would probably, it would help enhance whatever else if they're gonna work on the other side of the road or other areas of the road. It would alleviate some of the runoff that new project would have to take care of.
Right, so, any more comments from the board or
I
questions?
have a question.
Okay.
On the purchase and sale agreement, does that cover both Lot 2A and Parcel A? Or just Lot 2A?
Well, it's 6.68 acres.
2B and 2C.
Right, but it's 2A.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Remember, the single lot, if this was a single 6.6 acre lot, that was shown as Lot 2A on the plan. That was the plan you guys did for the
Yeah.
real estate company.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe that's.
That's the deed right here, and parcel A was never conveyed to turn left. That's, at least that's what it says in the deed.
So are you saying this doesn't reference all the property?
Oh, that was
At
asking.
6.6 acres?
I was just asking, does it?
Oh, I just looked at the acreage.
it
I'll
showed
have to
here
look
that-
at this.
That's correct.
Yeah, I'll have to look at this. I'll get a copy of this EV Realty Trust.
It showed
Plan.
that Parcel A was listed in the deed to be transferred as well. It was an interesting parcel, but maybe not.
It was
This
never
is parcel
conveyed.
A containing 2.52 acres and located in Harvard is not included in this deed.
Okay.
Any more questions here? All right, so we had a question, at least one from the audience?
Yeah, Bob Martel, 206 Long Hill Road. Just a comment first on the drawing we were just reviewing up there. Chiefly the water flow issues that are experienced along the river and at Long Hill are at the bottom of that drawing. Water is not flowing up the paper, but down the paper. So where we're having issues today anyway, is down Still River, closer to Long Hill Road. There's consistent flooding, there has been this year with the ground conditions, so that is the area I would, like to see scrutinized in terms of any potential increase in stormwater runoff. Although, there may be issues with the wetlands on the other side there, but chiefly the water issues are down the street, not up the street, it's sloped down.
So heading toward Bolton versus toward Harvard?
Yes.
You're saying?
And I've sent photos,
Mhm.
I'm sure you've seen,
Mhm.
that depict that. And then the other comment I wanted to make was on Horsley Witten, although we've mentioned in the meeting today that, their requirements have been satisfied. I just want to point out that there's at least 9 or 10 items in the Horsley Witten report where it says comment repeated as potential condition of approval. So there's a number of things that they're looking for that I wouldn't consider closed. They've maybe all been addressed at this point in some way, but there's a number of conditions, including the long-term pollution prevention plan, illicit discharge statement, stormwater, SWPP, and NFTs. Those are all still open issues.
That's right. I agree, and I think the Attorney Shane did refer that there were some open items as far as conditions in the Horsley Witten, so I don't believe them.
Right, we've reviewed those, and they are standard requirements that we provide a SWIP, and in fact, most of them are routine, which is why we have no issues with them.
But they would be incorporated as conditions if we were to start drafting something. Any other questions? Start in the back and we'll work over there.
Annalisa, Adopted Still River Road. Yeah, I just have a question about the drive. Could you just explain at what point it's two-way and what point it becomes one-way, and how the traffic is gonna work going in and out of the road?
So you're talking about the driveway?
Yeah,
Okay.
as you enter the complex.
Yeah, I'll be happy to address that to the board. We have a 15-foot pave width with a 5-foot hardened shoulder on it for a very short length, and then it goes to almost a small cul-de-sac at the end. So we've talked about this a couple hearings ago. The length of the proposed access is less than what would be required by the town to have pull-outs on it. Given the nature and the available turnout area, anybody coming onto the site they could get off the public way, they could get onto the site, and then if there was somebody that was trying to come down the other way, there's a significant area to see that, and they could wait for them. And even 15 feet with a 5-foot hardened shoulder, there's room for vehicles to pass, and that's a requirement. We have to provide a 20-foot clear span width for the fire department, and we have that there for a short length, and then we have a full width turnaround that exceeds the fire department and the town's requirements by quite a bit.
So I'd just like to point out that it keeps being reiterated that the land that you're building on is no larger than than the piece of land that you're going to build one house on. But I feel that there's been some confusion with the use of the amount of land with the amount of use in the same piece of land. And I think we really need to think about that, because you're going to have very likely 16 cars or more with these 8 units. So it's really not apples to apples at all. Thanks.
Mr. Pazzola is not coming tonight, correct?
That's correct. He's because of the meeting schedule, he's on vacation.
Of course, no worries. So is he expected at the next meeting?
Oh, yeah, he's integral part of the process, just wouldn't be.
No problem. I think I probably said that early on and I was late, so I apologize. Thank you for clarifying. My question about the cost, and I know it's come up before, so.
Just for the record, just name.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Anastasia Downey, Silver River Road.
Yep.
Gets me every time. Have you guys received numbers yet as to the cost of the maintenance of the systems? Septic, stormwater, etc., that will go to the homeowners? Is that an expected number, or is that not a standard thing to give out?
I suppose we could generate estimated maintenance costs. I mean, it's not that hard to do. If the board's interested in seeing that, I guess I'd like to understand what.
Docs, or as far as what they're going to be passed along to the.
Well, I mean, there's going to be a condominium association fee. There'll be a monthly condo fee. That condo fee will be used to provide all the maintenance, whether it's landscaping, stormwater, septic, any maintenance contracts that we're required to have, that will be paid for through that funding. There will be reserve funds collected as part of that each month that go into a reserve fund for replacement of the septic system, replacement. So you usually start out with some seed money in that fund, and then it's added to every month by the collection of the condo fees. So we haven't done a detailed condo budget yet. It's hard to do one until you actually have the contracts. But if the board would find it helpful, I could do a draft budget and show a line item for each of the maintenance requirements. So the septic, stormwater, there'd be plowing, there'd be landscaping, any other system maintenance that we're going to be obligated to. I think I've said this before, and it's really not an issue because it's typical, and that is that many times a zoning board will want, and actually Conservation Commission's ask for this sometimes too, as a condition of permits that we're required to provide the town a copy of our maintenance contracts with our septic and drainage people. I haven't had a town ask me to see a landscaping or a plow budget or bill, but just so that the town is assured that the condo association is in fact doing the required maintenance, it's not unusual that the condo association has to provide a copy of their contracts for that work to the town. But if the board, if it would be helpful, I will do, I'll get some rough numbers from the maintenance companies and include it in a rough draft budget for the condos, as part of the condo doc, if you want to see it.
Mr. Ahern, a follow-up question to you. You may know the answer to this, because I know you've dealt with 40Bs before. Do the folks that are part of the low-income housing program, do they have a prorated commitment or a reduced commitment to this budget? That
In the past they have.
Okay.
Based on,
Thank you.
So, we usually like to see that too spelled out. So.
Yeah, they have the equal voting rights, but their condominium fees are usually based on their lesser purchase price.
Thank you.
Any other questions? In the back.
Rick Brown from Still River Road. And I have a question, Mr. Chairman, for Seth. It relates back to that discussion and the explanation that was in an earlier meeting about the drawdown calculations, and I know that they made some effort to create a 2-foot drawdown, if I understood correctly the conclusion, which met the minimum requirement. Is that right, Seth? Or
If I may, Horsley on what, and on the initial submittal of the stormwater system, there were calculations showing both mounding, so that when the system is full and infiltrating water, that we're going to still meet a required 2-foot separation distance between the bottom of our system and the high groundwater table, so there's area for the water to go. And also demonstrating that within a set period of time, 72 hours, there's going to be sufficient drawdown. And we've provided new calculations showing that it meets both of those requirements now.
And did those meet like certain under certain conditions?
It's a model.
Model.
So that, yeah, there are different conditions within that. But we've submitted that, our last letter to your board and to Horsley Witten included those calculations.
So I think I understand that they met the minimum requirement. And I guess my question is, and my concern is that, and I pose it as a question, not as not trying to lead the discussion, but if that's the minimum, what would be considered an ideal separation distance? And the reason I bring that up is that I think that as I view this discussion, the real issue is the density of this particular proposed development. And ultimately, that's what the issue is. And as I see it, and as this area has been described aptly, I think, as a watershed, that those type of things like that separation distance, I mean, we all know that things go wrong, and I think if something is identified as a minimum in this type of an area where, it's such a sensitive area, that we should not only meet the minimum, but do everything we can to be exceptionally conservative, or require, that's a valid, I think, argument to deny that, exception to the permit because of the nature of that area that we're talking about. Because ultimately, that's what I think is our responsibility, not only to the people right now who are neighbors, but as stewards of the land, that's our responsibility for the future of our, you know, citizens of Bolton. This is, how do we, are we protecting, are we acting as stewards for this, what we know to be a really sensitive area? And that's just one observation.
We can always follow up, of course, I mean, they've concluded at one point that that 2 foot is, well, again, I don't.
Meets the standard.
It meets the standard, right, so whether it's minimum, we can ask them what would be optimal, but I don't know if that's, if they have, what the answer we have, you know, so. But I understand the point, you know, it is such a sensitive site that we don't wanna sort of cut ourselves short by saying, well, we do the minimum, but then minimum wasn't enough. Okay. Don't see any more hands up, so why don't we look to the next schedule for our next meeting, because we know we're gonna have documents coming in. And we do have a calendar here for March, which is a big deadline date on March 22nd, so we probably should do something early, earlier in March, or to the mid, so that we have to schedule something, a follow-up, we cut ourselves short. Because we'll have, at some point, you know, I talked to Eric about starting to pull together outlines for, you know, procedural history, list of documents, list of meetings, so we can start that process toward Monday.
Yeah, the 4th work for you guys? Monday the 4th, does that work for you guys?
Monday the 4th?
Yeah, let's try it now.
Oh, that's a Monday. I may be coming back from out of town that day. I don't know if that's.
So that's the first Monday of March.
Yeah.
That's a tough day for me.
How about Tuesday or Fifth?
It's a much better day for us.
Tuesday the 5th?
I believe I should be back in town by then. I will confirm tomorrow, but I think
Wednesday the 6th? Wednesday?
definitely Wednesday the 6th, I'd be.
Would that be safe for you?
Yeah, that's safe.
Yeah. Wednesday the 6th?
And that's when we have the voting meeting.
That works.
Okay.
Wednesday the 6th.
Yeah.
7 p.m.?
Meeting town hall, this location's getting,
Oh.
X means it's not available.
correct.
Okay.
I mean, that doesn't mean we can't meet, we just
Yeah.
don't have this location
Okay.
That's fine.
somewhere else.
Okay.
Because I don't wanna keep pushing the date out.
Yeah, right. No, I don't either, because we're
It's
gonna,
not
then, we only have until the 22nd, so then if we have a
How
follow-up
about
meeting.
the public safety building?
That is pretty much always occupied, but I can find out.
The library?
Library, that's not a Monday, I potentially could get the library.
So potentially Monday, the Wednesday the 6th would be the library, you could say?
I would try for that because it's much more conducive to a
For
large
parking,
meeting than.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm. And then with that, we should have a full set of documents by the 29th.
The
of March,
29th.
So that we can review that in advance of that.
Yep.
You know, so we're not-
I mean, I'll try and have them sooner, I'm
No,
just
right,
saying,
I'm saying, rather than
you know,
having everything
I
come
wanna
on the
set that
5th.
outside date a week from Friday.
Because we do tend to get a lot of things like the date we're having.
Right, no, I will get it to you.
Now we're-
In fact, we'll start sending stuff as early as tomorrow.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna wait and send it all. As each piece is done, we'll send it right in.
So, 7 p.m. we're going to shoot for the library?
We'll shoot for the library, and then I will confirm if we have to change that location.
A motion to continue, and a second. So motion to continue the hearing until 7 p.m. on March 6th in the library. Brad, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion to adjourn? Second, Andy? Okay. All in favor? Aye. 9 o'clock, adjourned.